So, if you've ever hired a chartered accountant, you've probably had that moment of hesitation, right? You get a quote and you think, am I paying a fair price for this? Well, today we're going to get a real answer. We're diving straight into the official fee guide from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, the ICAI, to see exactly what they recommend.
I mean, really think about it. Whether you're an individual just trying to file your taxes or a business owner navigating all that complex compliance, you've definitely asked this question. Is the price you were quoted fair? Is it too high? Maybe even too low? It often feels like you're trying to guess a number in a black box. Well, it turns out the ICAI wants to bring some serious clarity to all this. They've published a really detailed guide called the Minimum Recommended Scale of Fees. Now, here's the thing you got to remember. This isn't a law, it's not set in stone, but it is an incredibly powerful benchmark for both CAs and clients like us. So let's break it down and see what it tells us. Here's the game plan for today. First, we'll talk about what this guide actually is. Then, we'll get into the super important concept of city tiers. After that, we'll look at the real numbers for personal and business services, jump into audits, and then, and this is key, we'll finish with the important fine print that you absolutely have to know.
So first things first, what exactly is this guide? Well, it was put together by a special committee inside the ACI, and their whole goal was pretty simple, to create a standardized minimum fee structure. This gives accountants a baseline so their work is valued fairly, and for us, the clients, it gives us some much-needed transparency.
Okay, this is probably the single biggest idea in the entire guide. Where your CA is based matters a lot. The ICAI gets that you can't have a one-size-fits-all fee for the whole country. The cost of running an office in Mumbai is totally different from a smaller town, so they built a system to reflect that reality.
And here's how they do it. It's broken down into 3 simple classes. You've got your Class A cities. Think the big metros like Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. Then you've got Class B, which covers other large cities like Pune, Jaipur, and Hyderabad. And finally, Class C is basically everywhere else. As you're about to see, which class a city falls into has a huge impact on the final bill. All right, let's get into the actual numbers and see how this all plays out. We'll start with the kind of services that individuals need all the time, like getting legal documents drafted or filing taxes.
So, a great place to start is with drafting a partnership deed. This is a super common document, a foundational piece for so many small businesses or collaborations.
And boom, here is that city tier system in plain sight. Just look at this. For the exact same service, drafting a partnership deed with some tax advice, the minimum recommended fee is 20,000 rupees in a Class A city like Mumbai, but that drops to 15,000 in a Class B city like Jaipur, and it goes all the way down to 10,000 in a Class C city. The work is the same, but the location literally changes everything. But wait, location is only half the story. The other massive factor that drives up the cost is, you guessed it, complexity. Let's take a look at income tax returns to see just how big of a deal this is. Okay, check this out, because this is a huge point. In a Class A city, filing a simple, straightforward tax return for a salaried person has a recommended minimum of 8,000 rupees. But let's say that same person sold a property and now has complex capital gains to deal with. The fee jumps, not by a little, but 4 times, all the way to 32,000 rupees. Complexity really, really matters.
All right, so we've talked about individuals. Now let's scale things up and talk about businesses. What does the guide say it should cost to get a company off the ground and keep it running by the book?
So here we can see the recommended fees for setting up a company. For a private limited company or an LLP in a big Class A city, you're starting at a minimum of 35,000 rupees. But look what happens when you go for a public limited company, which has way more compliance work. That fee almost doubles to 65,000. And of course, you can see the costs step down for Class B and C cities. Yeah, just let that number sink in for a second. 65,000 rupees. And remember, that's the minimum recommended starting price to incorporate a public limited company in a major city like Delhi. That's a pretty serious investment just to get the structure right from day one. Of course, setting up a company is just the beginning. The ongoing compliance is absolutely critical. And that brings us to the world of audits and other highly specialized work. This gives you a great idea of the baselines for 2 very common types of audits. A standard tax audit for a business starts at a minimum of 40,000 rupees in a Class A city, and for the statutory audit of a small private limited company, you're looking at a baseline of 50,000. These are just essential services to stay legal and transparent. But what happens when the job is just too big or weird to fit into a neat little box? Well, for those really complex projects, the guide suggests billing by the day. And this shows you how they break that down. In a Class A city, a senior partner's time is valued at a minimum of 18,000 rupees per day. A qualified assistant comes in at 10,000, and so on down the line. So the final bill really depends on who is doing the work and for how long.
So, we've looked at a whole lot of numbers. But honestly, this next part might be the most important section of the whole guide. This is the fine print, the context that tells you what these numbers really mean.
Okay, lean in for this part because these details are absolutely vital. Number 1, these are minimums, not the final price. 2, the final cost will always depend on the time spent and how complex the job is. 3, things like GST and travel expenses are extra. 4, and this is a big one, the fee is based on your CA's city, not your city. And 5, the guide says bills should be sent out promptly. These are pretty much the rules of the game.
And this, right here, is the golden rule that wraps it all up. This quote is pulled directly from the document, and it says everything. This guide is just a benchmark, a starting point for a conversation. At the end of the day, the final price is, and always should be, an agreement between you and your CA.
So there you have it. We've pulled back the curtain on the official guide. You now have a solid reference point based on location, complexity, and the type of work involved. And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. Now that you have this benchmark, what do you consider a fair price for something as important as financial expertise? Thanks for joining me.